Today, things are getting just a little bit devilish. Hello and welcome to Many Adventures Mini. One of these days I'm going to get around to getting a whole proper introductory screen, but until then I'm just going to keep trolling along like I am. Today I'm going to be painting up a Teifling Rouge from the WizKids branded pre-primed miniatures like I've done with all of my other videos so far, so without ado let's go ahead and jump into that. Alright, so here we have our Teifling model that we're going to be painting today. I really liked the pose and sculpt on this one. I think it has a lot of nice little details. Alright, starting off here, I'm making a custom base for this miniature using some green stuff. I get that by mixing together this blue and yellow putty, and it makes this green putty. I work that until it's ready and apply it to the base. Use some water here on my fingers as a lubricant so it doesn't stick to my fingers. Just get it all nice and smooth, and then I come in with this sculpting tool, carve out the basic cobblestone shapes, and use the other end to bevel the cracks and get everything the way I want it. I use another base here to flatten it out so that the tops don't look too odd, and come in with a softer silicone sculpting tool to get the definition that I want in there. And lastly, I use a rock to give it a stone texture. Going on to the mini itself, I start off by cleaning off the mold lines with some files. Spend a little bit of time on this. It's relatively easy with this mini since it's all in one piece and there's no parts to be connecting, so it's just one mold line around the miniature. But coming off to painting, I start off with this mummy robes and quickly realize that this was not the right color to start with since the model's already so light. I should start with some darker colors so I get some better contrast. So I quickly move over to this necromancer cloak instead. And that does exactly what I want it to, and I go over most of the body's clothing with this. And as you might be able to tell watching this later, I don't always decide what colors I'm going to go with all ahead of time. I start with a handful that I know I do want, and later on I'll make decisions about what I want to be what, and you'll be able to see that with this necromancer cloak. I ignore the mantle to start with, but end up deciding to go with the dark gray color on the shoulders as well. Alright, now moving on to Dragon Red. I'm using this for the Teifling skin tone. It's the classic skin tone for a Teifling, this hellish demonic red color. I decided to go with it since this is the first time I'm painting a Teifling miniature, and I thought it seemed apt. So I'll just go across and cover all of the skin areas with the tail, the little bits of arm that are showing, the fingers underneath his gloves, as well as his face. And the red color really just makes this pop out and show up really well. And I really like the big splash of color it puts in. Going on here with my favorite leather brown color, coming in and doing all the leather bits. I like it on the shin guards here, and I spend quite a bit of time with all the straps this guy has, trying to get all the brown in. He has a lot of little strap details around his legs and torso with all the belts and pouches, and just this guy has a ton of straps. But it gave some nice detail to the model, and I enjoyed getting all the details in there, so it was still a good time. As I'm applying this leather, I'm also going back in with the dark gray necromancer cloak color to touch up any areas that I missed before, or put it into other areas that I hadn't put it before because I decided that's where it needed to be. I do that a couple of times throughout this process. And this just kind of exemplifies my style with these minis. I get a rough idea of what I want, and then I do a lot of constant touch-ups and going back to old areas to see if I need to change anything or touch up something I didn't quite get all the way I wanted. It's a bit of a back and forth between advancing onto the next steps and getting more stuff on there and going back to older stuff to make sure it's holding up to what I want at the end. Here's where I start using the Necromancer cloak on the shoulders, because I changed my mind with thinking I might go with a different color there and decided I wanted it the same as the rest of the torso and pants. Finally coming back to the mummy robes a little bit to actually get the shirt sleeves done, now that it will actually stand out properly. Also used that Necromancer cloak on the gloves. Seemed appropriate with this guy, so I went with that. And again, just going back and touching things up with more of the brown and the Necromancer cloak to just fill in areas I think need a little bit more paint, doing additional coats. I'm going to use this matte black here on his hair. It's not always the best method for doing black hair, just going straight to the black, but I did like how it looked on this one, so that's why I decided to go with it. Here I'm starting to use the off-white with the mummy robes to detail the shirt down the center underneath the leather armor, and I accent the mantle a little bit in some more leather brown. Just going all across the model and touching up bits here and there. You probably won't be able to see it, but I always had this tiefling's tail resting against my finger, and it was constantly rubbing paint off, and I had to go back to it. Gonna use some plate mail here to get the knives and some metal details on a lot of his buckles. He has a lot of straps, and so all the straps have a lot of buckles. Here I'm using a black wash that I made myself. It's something that I'm playing around with to see if I like it, and I really did like the effect that I got from this black wash. I used a bit of a glossy medium for making it, so when it dries kind of shiny, but I tamped that down at the end with my matte varnish anyway, so this is just for the actual shading effect I get. And I think that this works better for me than the store-bought kind that I was using before, so I'll probably continue using it in the future. But once that's dry, I come back in with the original base coat colors again and hit the high points in order to bring them back up a little bit. Don't need to do too much of this just because the wash I used didn't do too much staining, so I was able to get everything back to the tone that I wanted relatively easily. Here I pull out the uniform gray. It's kind of a middle tone gray that I use to start some of the highlighting process on the gray leather armor. Just hitting all the high raised areas that are pointing towards my light source. Being relatively well covered with this coat, trying to make sure I leave my mid-tones and shadows alone so that they stand out. I do the same thing here with the mummy robes, going back over the shirt just to make sure it's not too dark. And I come in with this fur brown to do the same thing with all the leather bits, but quickly realize I never went over it with the leather brown, so I do that real quick before going back to it and getting my 3 levels of shade to light in there as well on the leather. Here I'm getting started on the eyes, going in with the black and then the mummy robes, and then again with the black just to get a simple eye effect. Nothing too fancy, but it is very small detail work, and I'm still working on perfecting it. Then I come in here with this pure red color as the highlight color for the skin. I apply that all over the skin tone areas for the raised parts on the face and the exposed bits on the arm as well as the tail. This really starts helping the miniature pop out, and I really am starting to like the way it's going at this point. Coming in with this ash gray. This is the highest highlight I'm using on the gray leather armor, only applying it to the very top edges that are exposed towards the light source. This really helps keep the miniature from looking too dark overall and brings just the overall brightness up so that it really pops better sitting on the tabletop. I do the same thing here with the matte white on the shirt parts. It really helps make that shirt seem like a bright white. And I also do the same thing again with this lava orange on the skin tones to just hit the highest edges. Here I'm going over to the base that I put together earlier, just putting a primer on it so that it can accept some paint. Starting off the base coat with a dark stone, just giving it a thorough coat in that. Use the airbrush here a little bit to help it dry faster. Then I just dry brush a couple layers of uniform gray and ash gray on there in order to brighten it up. Again, using the airbrush to help it dry a bit faster, and then a little bit of my homemade wash all over just to really make those details pop. And once it's dried, I apply a little bit of glue in some of the cracks between the cobblestones and attach some of this flocking to make it look like we've got some grass growing up from between the cracks. Then I pull this guy off and start clipping away at the base he came with to get down to just his feet. Have to be a little bit careful here, doing my best not to damage the paint job I just spent all that time on, so I clip and slice and file away at it until I'm happy. Then just a couple dabs of super glue. Quick set, and he's right on there. He's not coming off anytime soon. Use a little bit of my black just to blacken the edges of the base and make sure that I hide up any of the exposed plastic bits or bits that need to be covered over. Lastly, I'll use this matte varnish that I like, just thoroughly cover everything. This will bring down the shininess from my homemade wash and really give a nice effect for the end. And here is the final images. I'm really happy with how this one came out. I think the colors really pop and the red really does stand out, and I'm just really happy with how this miniature came out. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any feedback at all, feel free to put it down in the comments section below. I love to read through that and see what people have to say. For those of you who might be interested, I do sell some of the minis that I paint in these videos down in my Etsy store. You can find the link for that in the description. If you're interested, please take a look, and if you want to buy some, I've only got one up for each miniature at the moment. I might increase the stock later down the line, but so far I'm just doing one for every video that I make along in the series, except for some that I have up for personal use. So if you're interested, again, go take a look at that. The link will be down in the description. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of my videos, go ahead and subscribe. I try to get videos out every Thursday morning, and I'll be here again with you guys next week.